Alrighty. I think I'm back. Alright, guys. So, today we're going to be going through the Sony hack. And what I like about this article is that it goes into detail on how it happened. And I don't know if you guys remember, back in 2014, Sony Pictures wanted to come out with the movie called, I forgot it, The Dictator, I think it is. And it was a movie about assassinating Kim Jong-un. And obviously he didn't appreciate that, so what he did is that he hired a bunch of hackers. They say it was state-sponsored hackers from within, or it could have been from China. And they breached computer systems belonging to Sony, and they released everything from emails to the actual movie itself. They really got a lot of internal access, and they released a lot of information that definitely shouldn't be public. So we're gonna go through that now, and right here, right now. So let's go. I'm gonna read this whole article. It is about 15 pages long, looks like. Alright guys, let's get started. The hack on Sony Pictures Group. Entertainment, the anatomy of one of the most devastating attacks in history. How the Lazarus Group executed the compromise. The Lazarus Group in 2014 hack on Sony Pictures Entertainment. So as I'm reading this, I'm gonna break down my thoughts and maybe how I think they did it, and or maybe how I would approach the target. So let's go. Over the past few years, hacks against companies and governments have continued to grow, and their methods become more varied and effective. Memorable hacks include the attack against Yahoo, which compromised every active account, a total of 3 billion. I believe this hack happened in 2013 as well, a year prior. And if I'm not mistaken, I think all they took were, what did they take? I think the actual conversations of the emails, but I don't think they took any passwords because they were hashed, and I don't think any according to Yahoo, they didn't take any passwords and any personal information. But I don't understand, because I mean, it doesn't get more private than email address. When you're emailing someone, you're usually emailing someone about something personal. So anyway, the WannaCry ransomware attacks, which struck across the globe, which notably affecting England and Scotland's National Health Service hospital computers. So usually ransomware groups like attacking hospitals because they pay the fastest, because they need their computer systems up and running. So they'll usually pay the fee. So that's why a lot of the times these ransomware groups attack hospitals, forcing hospitals to turn away patients. And the 2014 Sony hack, which unlike many other hacks, caused actual physical damage and appeared to have been directed by a nation state to achieve its political ends. Again, I was explaining that Kim Jong-un didn't take the threat of this movie. He didn't take it lightly, so he most likely hired Chinese hackers, or it could have been within North Korea, which North Korea doesn't have good internet. So while these attacks initially captured the attention of the world, they have become less interesting as the time has passed. But as past hacks can offer insights into dealing with IT security in the future. For example, the Sony hack has at least 3 very good lessons. First, it is one of the first times actual physical damage was done using a cyber attack, and it's forecast some of the greater damage some experts fear a cyber attack could wreak. Second, the Sony attack used pieces of the WannaCry ransomware, which shows how hackers can use old attacks to formulate new efforts. Third, some of the steps, like strong password protocols and data encryption or deletion, that would have helped to protect against the Sony hack are still important today and still are not properly administered. For these reasons, the Sony hack is a valuable case study, and it is worth close examination. So let's go to the third step. Third, some of these steps like strong password protocols. I've always said this before. A strong password it could help you from getting your Wi-Fi breached. In other words, brute forced inside. Same thing can be said about a user account, whether that's Gmail, whether that's your any account that requires a password. You got to make sure you make it at least 12 characters long. Add some numbers, some symbols, whatever they allow, right? Because there's usually like a set of protocol there's a set protocol where you have to set a password a certain way, right? And every web page will be different from one another, so they'll require different. I mean, some websites are okay with like a 6-character long password, so it can literally be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that could count as a password, which is extremely weak and could easily be broken. So definitely don't do that. So okay, and then what else? Data encryption. So a lot of the times you definitely could encrypt data within your system, and then you decrypt it and use it again. A lot of companies honestly do this as well. So if these guys try to encrypt something that's encrypted, it's not gonna make any sense, because they won't be able to use it. Like, it would be useless to them. Even if they, for example, if they encrypt something, they can send that data off into a server, like on a remote location, and they can decrypt it themselves because they know the password to decrypt it. But encrypting something that's encrypted, what the heck? Like, it wouldn't make any sense. It just encrypted data is useless. So so on September, let's keep reading. So on September 2014, unbeknownst to Sony Pictures Entertainment, Sony, hackers broke into Sony's networks and stole significant amounts of confidential data and planted malware. On the Monday before Thanksgiving, when Sony employees tried to log into their computers, a picture of a red skeleton appeared on their computer screens with the words "hacked by GOP" and the threat to release data later. In the coming weeks, the hackers posted statements online containing links to data from Sony networks, including email, salary information, movies that had not been released, and as well as additional information. The malware also destroyed 70% of Sony's laptops and computers. In a historic move, the United States government formally attributed the hack to North Korea and charged a North Korean government hacker with a crime. Based on the variety of indicators, these included the hacker's calls for Sony not to release the movie The Interview. Oh, that's what the name was. That's the name of the movie, The Interview. I thought it was A Dictator, which was a comedy about the assassination of Kim Jong-un. Sony eventually bent under the pressure and only released the movie for download. This paper provides an overview on how the hackers, members of what is commonly called the Lazarus Group, carried out the hack and how the hack was traced to North Korea. So the education of Airbnb's Brian Chesky, Fortune, the hack of the century. I'm assuming that's a magazine. So again, I've said this before and I'll say this again. To me, it sounds like Sony got hacked by the most common way, which is phishing. And again, as you know, phishing is the act of pretending to be someone within the company, or maybe some sort of IT guy from an internet provider, or some IT guy from some other service that has a connection to the company, and you trick the employee on giving you the credentials with his password, right? And once you get those credentials and his password, you got his account, and the account itself is all dependent on the access that the company gives them and the importance of the person actually. So let's just say this person is responsible of editing the movie. I would assume that he would have an original copy of the movie itself, and that's how maybe these guys, this Lazarus Group guy, got a hold of the movie. Was maybe some editor guy for Sony. So that's what I could assume. But anyway, so phishing is the prime way to get into a system usually, and then second would probably be some sort of exploit or some sort of 0-day, and maybe some sort of web bug, SQL attack, etc., etc. Right? So let's keep reading. There are two technical ways for hackers to obtain data that belongs to people or organizations: break in and take it, or intercept their data as it is transmitted and then decrypt it. Social engineering is another way to get data. The hacker just asks for it in a way that tricks the user into believing they should give their information to the hacker, often before conducting a phishing attack. Hackers will search online for information about individuals whose information they hope to steal, and then use that information to specifically target that person. A method called spear phishing. Often hackers will copy legitimate emails but then replace their hyperlinks in those emails with hyperlinks that will redirect potential victims to infrastructure under the hacker's control, where the hacker would deliver malware to the victim's computer. The methods of tricking users into handing over their data are only limited by the hacker's ingenuity and users' credulity. So again, I'm not surprised, right? So these hackers must have done a very, very thorough investigation on the employees who worked at Sony. So they must have read everybody's title. Okay, this is the CEO. Okay, this is the director. Okay, this is an actor. Okay, this is the IT guy. Okay, this is this guy. This that. They must have got a very good picture of who works at this company, and then they slowly must have done like a phishing campaign. I'm talking about everybody gets a phishing email, right? It could be the IT guy talking to the CEO, right? The hacker pretending to be the IT guy talking to the CEO, and then the hacker again pretending to be the CEO talking to the actor, and then maybe to the director, etc. So one of these people will eventually open up, and unfortunately, they download some malware and get the computer hacked, and or they'll give their credentials, and the hacker will have them and be able to log in as him, right? Another thing too is that a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll have a login portal on a subdomain. So I'm assuming these guys did some subdomain enumeration as well, and they probably figured out, okay, let's see if we can get the credentials so we can log in, because a lot of people can work and do work from remote locations. So maybe that's how they got into the networks, and or again, another way inside their networks would be that one of the employees downloaded a payload, right? So once they're inside, the computer starts communicating with a command and control server outside on a virtual private server, and then from there, the virtual private server can tell the computer with the malware to scan the networks. It can read his keystroke. It can read the files saved in the hard drive, etc. So that's even more devastating, in my opinion, than getting somebody's credentials and logging in as them. Again, it just all depends, right, of how the company sets all this stuff up. Alright, let's scroll down. The hackers who participated in the 2014 Sony hack had a variety of possibilities for phishing attacks. According to the FBI, for example, Facebook sends emails to users to alert them when a computer with a new IP address signs into their account, and contains links to follow up and sign in. In this instance, the hackers copied these legitimate emails but changed the hyperlink text for logging into Facebook, which would Facebook link to this one. Ooh. Which likely would have sent the user to the malicious infrastructure. Although the hyperlink was not active by the time the FBI obtained access to the email, the hackers also created emails that looked like they came from Google to try to gain access to Sony's workers' computers. One email, for example, purported to welcome a recipient to Google service, but included a link to HTTP and then domain redacted, which I'm assuming, I don't know, they hid it just to not show us. I'm talking about the article. The people who wrote the article, they hid this, and they're showing us that. So very long. Interesting. Which was also likely to send the user to a malicious file. That kind of makes sense. And HTTP to send the user to a malicious file, and another email claimed to be from Google, alerting the users that malicious activities are detected. But the Google hyperlinks offer information about how to mitigate malicious activities, and Google's terminal service contained URLs that were not related to Google and instead were likely malicious. So let me go up here, right? So normally what hackers do is that what they'll do is that they'll copy the original Facebook login, and obviously you've probably used Facebook, right? And it has this particular look, etc., etc. What you can do is you can actually copy the HTML code of that site and then save it, and then you can upload it on a virtual private server and then upload it there, and then you can set up a domain name that kind of looks like Facebook, but it's not Facebook. For example, this is a perfect example, as you can see here, right? So somebody downloaded the login for the Facebook just based off here, but this doesn't mean that this is Facebook. This is the actual domain, but it'll look like the original Facebook login. So hackers, they'll set up domains that kind of look like Facebook or sound like Facebook, but it's not. It's this Funkug. I don't even know how they even mistake that. I guess looking at FA, they just assumed, oh yeah, that's Facebook. So that's how the guy got. So let's keep going. A private researcher found a number of Sony users and employees, including Michael Linton, Sony CEO, had received phishing emails pretending to be from Apple. These emails asked users to verify their Apple IDs because of supposed unauthorized activity, and provided them with a link to click on that took them to a form that appeared to be from Apple but were fake. When the Sony employees typed their credentials into the fake forms, the credentials fell into the hands of the individuals who sent the fake emails. Again, like I was telling you, it seems like these guys really did put in work when it came to the phishing campaign. So now they're sending. Now they're pretending. First, they were pretending to be from Facebook, Google, and Apple. That's crazy. So these guys were definitely trying to get access into something. And a company like Sony, I'm assuming they have thousands of employees. So one of them eventually will fall victim to it. So, all right. So employees include, that these emails asked users to verify their Apple IDs because of supposed unauthorized activity, and provided them with a link to click on that. Click on that took them to a form that appeared to be from Apple but were fake. When the Sony employees typed their credentials into the fake forms, their credentials fell into the hands of the individuals who sent the fake emails. It appeared that the phishing emails were especially directed at Sony employees who had broad access to the company's networks. Information the hackers may have gathered by conducting surveillance by Sony employees via LinkedIn. Yeah, look at that, you see? So I got my question kind of answered. So it looks like the hackers used LinkedIn to get employee information. And again, you can always find specific things. Maybe somebody was the animator, you know, maybe there's a social media guy, etc., etc. There's a bunch of targets that you can do to get to somebody, right? So, and by the way, guys, sorry about that. I'm playing lo-fi music, and sometimes the dumb commercials, I forget that they're playing, so just ignore that. I'm checking something out real quick, guys. Just give me a second. Looks like nothing yet, huh? Alright, let's continue. Alright, although experts cannot point to one specific set of spear phishing emails that gave the hackers access they needed to infiltrate Sony's networks, it is quite clear that hackers used spear phishing to gain the initial information necessary to stage the hack. Infrastructure used in the hack. To carry out the Sony hack, the actors use various infrastructure components, including certain IP addresses, compromised hop point computers, proxy IP address services, and dynamic domain name systems, or DDNS. An IP address internet protocol is a set of 4 numbers ranging from 0 to 255 and separated by a period that is used to route traffic on the internet. Each device that uses the internet has an IP address that can be used to identify it and send data to the device. The FBI investigation of the Sony hack found malicious activity related to the hack originating from several IP addresses assigned to North Korea. So usually what ISPs do, or internet service providers, is that they came up with this system to give specific IP addresses to certain countries, or actually every country. I believe that every country has a specific IP block, right? So so the IP addresses are broken into classes. So I think there's A, B, and C. If I'm not mistaken, C is the private one. So if you got a home network, you're most likely using a private IP address, which, if I'm not mistaken, it starts at 192.10 and 172. So those are the private IP addresses that you most likely have at your house. But everything outside that is either assigned to a specific company, like Google, I think, has their own specific IP addresses, and Yahoo, etc., like the big players in tech, and then countries have their own specific IP addresses. So that's how they were able to see the IP block range going to North Korea. So so let's go. The IP address associated with the activity came in 2 blocks. First is a block of IP addresses, which is this one, right? And are registered to a company in North Korea. And then the second is a block of addresses, 210 all the way to, let me see, 255. So they were given a whole stack of IPs right here. You can see the same thing for this one. So let's see, which are registered to a Chinese company but have been used or leased by North Koreans since before 2009. Again, a lot of people don't just sell out to make money, and I'm not surprised that this Chinese company would do the same in North Korea. China's probably the reason that North Korea actually has any good internet access. I'm assuming, because I know South Korea is just closed off. Like, it won't even. I don't think they'll even sell them internet. That's for sure. And then what's above North Korea? China? I'm not even good with geography. Sorry about this. I'm not surprised that a Chinese company would sell some sort of internet service to North Korea, and they use them as a hot point. So to me, it definitely sounds like it would be more Korean. It's usually North Korean than it probably would be Chinese, just based off this. So to see going from the devices associated with these addresses, the hackers carried out activity directed against Sony. The hackers also used hotpoints computers to help hide their identity and location. A hotpoint conceals a user's original IP address because it acts as intermediary between the original IP address and the victim's networks. Let's read that one more time. The hackers also use hotpoints computers to help hide their identity and location. A hotpoint conceals a user's original IP address because it acts as an intermediary between the original IP address and the victim's network. So, as we were reading earlier, it seems like these hackers exploited other computers on the internet, and they were using those exploited exploited computers as hot points back to the home base, which is North Korea. And that's a very good way to kind of conceal what you're doing, because instead of like just tracking the malicious activity directly to the North Korean IP address, you would first have to investigate. Oh, okay, let's see what's going on in a hacked computer in Malaysia. Okay, let's go investigate a hacked computer in I don't know, Thailand. And let's investigate a hacked computer in the Philippines. So if you're using these hot points, you gotta investigate these computers, and that slows down the investigation to a point, instead of it actually like it coming from the original source, which is North Korea, right? So that's why a lot of hackers do this technique, because it acts as an intermediary between the original IP address and the victim's network. So the victim can only see the address of the hotpoint computer. Hotpoint computers usually belong to innocent users who are not involved in the hack. But user devices without knowing hackers have compromised their computers. In this case, the hackers used a particular piece of malware called a Bramble worm to compromise computers and use them as hotpoints. Malware is a piece of software. So worms, if you don't know, is a program that scans computers and checks if they're vulnerable. If they're vulnerable, it'll exploit that computer, it'll infect it, and then it'll use that infected computer to scan other computers on the internet, and it just keeps propagating like that, right? Like once it finds one exploitable computer, it infects it, and then it'll just keep hopping. It'll use that one to keep going everywhere, right? That makes sense. So malware is a piece of software or code which is designed to take control away from the legitimate owner of the computer and give it to another, usually without legitimate owner knowing about it. This piece of malware came in the form of a worm which tries to progress infect computers, typically by exploiting a vulnerability in the victim's computers, or by brute force attacks upon victim computers. That's another thing you can do, as well, brute force, like SSH open ports, and maybe other devices that run like simple default passwords, and etc., right? So the Bramble worm spread itself using self-replication by infecting a new victim system via brute forcing attacks on the victim's server message block protocol. A brute force attack is an attack that tries to log into the computer using a list of combinations of usernames, passwords, and intent to guess the correct credentials. The list of the combinations is often in the thousands. The SMB is a network file sharing protocol used by Microsoft, means of sharing files and more between computers. Once Bramble gets the correct credentials and gained access to the computer, it surveyed the computer and collected the machine's IP address, system name, operating system, username, last logged in, and last password used, and sent the information to one or more of the email addresses that the hackers had hardcoded into the malware. Using this information, the hackers could log into one of the infected computers and use it as a hotpoint to disguise the hacker's actual location. So proxy services were another infrastructure component that hackers used to hide their identity. Proxy servers act much like hotpoints in that they are intermediary between the original user and the end computer. But unlike hotpoints, which are formed using hacked computers, proxy servers are offered by businesses to consumers who want to avoid sending their IP address across the internet for good or bad reasons. The proxy service user can still use their original computer, but their request for data gets routed through another intermediate server which contacts the end destination, effectively obscuring the original IP address. The Sony hackers use proxy service as another way to disguise their identity. So this is how the screen, as you can see here, kind of creepy, right? So this is what Sony employees saw on their computers as soon as they started it, right? Warning. We've already warned you, and this is just a beginning. We continue till our request be met. We've obtained all your internal data, including your secrets and top. Can't even see what that says. If you don't want to obey us, we'll release data shown below to the world. Determine what will you do November the 24th. And it even has a time date. And then it has a
We're doing anything after 8 p.m.
links. So Sony Pictures, stockfootage.com, sp.zip, DMI, play, and then etc. Sony.
No hidden fees or equipment charges. Click or call 1-833 Verizon to switch to
So the hackers also use the dynamic domain name system to conceal their activities. The domain name service is a naming system of computers, services, or any other resources connected to the internet. It is often explained as a phone book for the internet by resolving human-friendly computer host names to IP addresses. For example, the domain name might be www.justice.gov, and it resolves. So in other words, long story short is that the domain name system will change it, like www.google.com, into the IP address, right? And then communicate with that IP address, and then that IP address will give you the requested information that you want, or the requested site, right? So that's how it works. So the DDNS allowed users to control what IP address is assigned to their domain. The user can change the domain's associated IP address to the DDNS provider, and changes will propagate quickly across the internet. While it will take longer using a DNS service, the Sony hackers used DDNS to help hide what they were doing. The malware they sent to computers would force the victim to computer to look up the IP address assigned to a domain, but instead of connected to that address, it will cause the computer to perform a XOR operation using a specific hard-coded XOR key to convert the original IP address to a new IP address, and then the computer would connect to that address. That meant even though the domain embedded in the malware, investigators could not determine the location of the computers the hackers controlled unless they had a detailed analysis of the malware and knew the XOR key. XOR, which is short for exclusive OR, is a process of computer science where a binary key is applied to data to mix the two streams of data to form a new data stream. If the input is either the new key or data stream is 1, the other is 0. The new input will be 1 if both the initial inputs are 1 or 0. Then the output will be 0 as demonstrated below. So I guess, I don't know. That's interesting. You guys are gonna have to Google what that is, because I don't really do it. I don't think I've ever used XOR in programming, but I know it's probably important. I mean, the combinations of computers and their associated IP addresses, hotpoint computers, and the malware used to gain access to them. Proxy services and the DDNS provided the Sony hackers with the infrastructure they needed to support their intrusion into Sony networks and disguise their actions and identity. So honestly, to me, I mean, even though these guys did a lot of work to hide who they were, from using hacked computers as hotpoints to using a proxy service, aka a VPN. It's just another fancy for virtual private network. And not only do they use a virtual private network, they use this thing called a dynamic domain name system. So what happens is that the IP address of the domain just changes. So I guess they were able to hide themselves, and then somehow they implemented the Zor thing, which I don't know how. This meant that even with the domain embedded in the malware, blah 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 blah. Let me see, hold on. Zor, which is short for exclusive, is a process in computer science. Let me see what they use. Oh, here it is. The Sony hackers used a DDNS to help them hide what they were doing. The malware they sent to computers would force the victim computers to look up the IP address assigned to a domain. But instead of connecting to the address, it would cause a computer to perform a Zor operation using a specific hard-coded Zor key to convert the original IP into a new IP address. So I guess it's using the Zor method to change the IP address. But then again, the way that the internet's set up, I'm pretty sure they were only allowed a limited amount of IP addresses, even if they were able to change it. So I don't know, but it's still I would still say this is a genius way to kind of keep yourself from being known, even though, again, obviously just by all this information, they still got tracked somehow. But I guess they would have just been tracked a lot easier and faster if they didn't use any of these methods. So the combinations of computers and their associated IP address, hotpoint computers, and the malware used, etc., blah blah blah. Alright, so let's go down. So the malware, how the attackers got into Sony's network. This is interesting, and this is the cover, if I'm not mistaken, of the movie, The Interview. So I guess both of these guys were playing assassins or something, and their job was to take out Kim Jong-un. So this is going, the malware, phishing success, how the hackers got into Sony's networks. The FBI investigation found that the hackers tried to distribute the malware through spear phishing emails and links posted on Facebook pages associated with. Let me see. Oh, yeah, and although it is not apparent if any of the malware on the page associated. Oh yeah, and links posted on Facebook pages associated with Sony actors involved. The Interview, although it is not apparent if any of the malware on these pages led to a breach of Sony network, they did, however, find a particular spear phishing emails that appear to have been successful in breaching Sony's networks. Analysts found that 7 instances when Sony's system beaconed to a specific Chinese IP address between September 26th all the way to October 2014. Dang, so they had about, let me see, I think October is 31 days long. So they had 5, and then you had 6. So they had 11 days of access into their system before somebody, I guess, figured it out. And in 6 of the 7 times, the Sony user account used to connect to the IP address belonged to one specific Sony employee. What the heck? When a forensic team looked at that employee's hard drive, they found a spear phishing email sent from bluehottrain@hotmail.com. On September 25, 2014, part of the text of the email read, "Here's the link," and then included a hyperlink to HTTP and then some weird domain. Of course, never click on weird looking domains, especially like these. They lead to nothing good. Although the link was no longer active, the forensics analysts separately found a file named redacted name of business, advertising video clips, adobe.exe. Wow, that's crazy. So another thing too is that executables with .exe 100% of the time can be malware, especially if you get it through an email provider. A lot of the times, I've noticed that a lot of email providers have gone so advanced that they have built-in virus scanners. So a lot of these get caught, and this did happen in 2014. If I'm not mistaken, in 2014, computers were a lot less secure than I would say in today's standards. So I'm pretty sure something like this, I don't think would pass an email antivirus program. And in 2014, I think it was Windows 7 was still around or was a big thing. And then Windows 8 came out, which was doo-doo in my opinion. And then Windows 10 fixed that stuff. And then we are in Windows 11. Interesting. I'm curious to see what Windows 12 will look like. The use of the name Adobe Flash in the title of the file was likely a way to distract the Sony employee and make it appear that the file was a media file that would play in Adobe Flash, when it was really an executable file. That makes sense. .exe. I didn't see no .pdf, which is a Adobe proprietary document viewing format. So let's keep going. It was likely to distract employees and make it appear that the file was executable, meaning it will download a program to the computer. Analysis determined that this file was malware, and when downloaded, it caused the computer to connect to 5 hard-coded IP addresses that had been written directly into the malware, including the Chinese IP address that the Sony systems had beaconed to 7 times between the end of September and the beginning of October. The malware had the ability to receive commands from the attackers that would allow the malware to collect host computer information, delete itself, list directories, and process, collect data in memory, write data to a file, and set sleep intervals. It appeared to be the way that hackers were able to access Sony networks. That's the thing that's devastating about malware, is that it pretty much owns your computer. It can do anything. I mean, if this guy wanted to, he could have deleted the whole hard drive. He can encrypt the whole hard drive. He can install, upload programs. He could do all kinds of stuff. He could read your keystrokes. If you have a webcam, you can turn that on. Oh man, it is devastating, honestly. So it seems like these guys were able to get to their networks based off whoever this employee was. That's another conspiracy too, is that they're saying this employee possibly did it on purpose. Me personally, I don't know. It depends, right, on his background. I mean, is the dude, no offense, is he North Korean by nationality? Is he, what's his background like? Does he, is he radical dude? Did he just get, now I don't think he got fired and he got mad at the company, but, sometimes there's a huge psychological, you gotta know about, there's a whole background into an employee and why they might do what they do, right? But I don't think this is intentional. I think he just fell victim to the hack. So how the malware spread. The malware used against Sony is specifically a server message block, SMB worm tool. And it includes a listening implant, lightweight, backdoor proxy tool, destructive hard drive tool, that's not good, and a destructive target cleaning tool. The SMB worm tool is what gained initial access to the networks, which then allowed other parts of the malware to complete their tasks. The SMB worm worked like Rumble worm. The hackers used to compromise computers to use as hot points. It is a huge. It used a brute force authentication attack to spread using Windows SMB shares. The purpose of the Windows SMB is to allow information like files and printers. The worm had 2 threads of execution. Thread refers to the smallest unit of processing that can be performed in a operating system. The first involved the worm sending information back to the hackers in the form of logs. A log is a time-stamped list of certain events that are relevant to the particular system or of program. For example, access logs for web servers, logs of changes. Hold on, guys. Let's see. Alright, let me go back. Sorry about that. So anyway, information back to the hackers in the form of logs. Logs of changes made to the databases. In this instance, every 5 minutes the worm would call home and send log data back to the command and control computer about whether it was successful at spreading to other computers running Windows. In particular, the worm spread to other window hosts using port 445, a channel or endpoint of communication for a computer or network. And the port 445 is notoriously attack prone because it is often open and available. The malware created a network file share and gave unrestricted access to the share, which meant any other computer on the network could access it. Then it used the Windows Management Interface, WMB, command line to try to communicate to other network computers to launch code and spread itself. Every process is launched using a command line, as the command line is used to describe which application to run. So the hackers would have used the WMB command line to try to start new applications to contact other computer networks. Also, when the worm called back the C2 with information about its success, it would accept new scan tasking. The hackers would send new commands to the worm using a computer programming language. The second thread worked on brute forcing attacks against other computers' SMB connections. A brute force attack means that the program guesses over and over what the password is for a program, network, or other component until it eventually guesses the right password and is granted access. This demonstrates the need for strong passwords. So I'm assuming, okay, so this is making more sense. Again, once that employee fell victim to the Trojan, looks like the first program or malware they used was a worm, right? And again, they have a fancy name for it, Brumble. I guess they had a version of that, and what that program pretty much did was it started scanning for SMB services, which means server message block. So what happens is that service allows Windows computers to communicate with one another and send data to one another, right? So the worm started brute forcing the way to get into these services, and once it was inside, it started getting into other computers like that, pretty much, and it had access to whatever files these computers are sharing and communicating. The second thread worked on a brute force attack against other computers. SMB connections. A brute force attack means the program guesses over and over what the password is. Let me see. This demonstrates the need for strong password, which is more difficult to guess password than authentication, which requires more than a single password to grant access. It is particularly helpful in protecting against breaches enabled by phishing attacks, because even if a person gives away one means of authentication, the other method has not been compromised. These two threads provide the hackers access to the Sony network while updating them on its actions. Spread the malware by connecting with other computers on the network. So cool picture, passwords. The malware's listening implant. As the listening implant is installed, it decrypts part of the computer's binaries or compiled versions of the program using AES for Advanced Encryption Standard, and a widely used method of encryption. AES is a block cipher, meaning that the text is arranged into blocks of text, and it encrypts only 16 bytes of data at a time. It arranges the bytes into 4 rows with 4 columns, and it requires byte substitution, shifting rows, mixing columns, and adding a round key, although to decrypt, the process would be reversed. Lightweight backdoor. The malware used against Sony also contained a lightweight backdoor that functioned as a backdoor listener. Lightweight means that the software was relatively simple, and the backdoor in terms of hacking is illicit portal or point of entry that hackers use or install in the system, which gives them the ability to come and go as they please and gives them remote access to the system. This type of malware is often called a remote access Trojan or RAT, and can be used to install other malware on the system or exfiltrate data. In this case, the backdoor was a listener designed as a service, DLL. DLL is short for Dynamic Link Library. It is a library of code, and more than one program you would use it at a time. The creator could then execute commands on the command line and execute arbitrary code. So DLL is how would I say this? So if your operating system wants to give you certain functionality, whether that's what would be an example, like the webcam access, the access to the microphone, or access to like specific things that the operating system can do, a program that you're using is communicating with these libraries or these functions, right? So it's pretty much calling upon it. So it's code asking code for permission to do stuff, and that code is designed obviously to do specific stuff. Again, it could be audio services, it could be webcam, it could be keystrokes, it could be anything, right, on a computer that it could do. So that's what a DLL program is pretty much something that a program calls to do. But obviously this Trojan is pretending to be a DLL program, so it is a lot harder to catch, I guess. Because if you look at it, it'll probably just say something like, I don't know, just something that a DLL does. Whatever's the most commonly used DLL function, I wouldn't be able to tell you what that is. So, I mean, in my opinion, a good way to check if you've been if there's a Trojan listening, it can never avoid internet traffic. So in other words, you can run a program like a Wireshark, and then you can see the communications of what's going in your computer and out. So that's a very good way to see if there's some shady traffic going on. Specifically, I would recommend you close down everything that communicates with the internet. So that's if that's your browser, if that's I don't know, some messaging service, close everything, and then watch traffic. If there's a bunch of traffic going on, there's a good chance that there is a Trojan tool installed in your computer, and it's listening to what's going on. So definitely, computers can be a tough thing to learn and or do, my friend. So how much do I got left? Let me see, guys. Hold on. So we are on page what is this one? 7. Alright, so let's keep going. Meeting the hackers. So they wanted the hackers system. This way the hackers could do a large number of things to advance their access to and knowledge of the computer system, as well as their ability to do damage. For example, the backdoor to enable the file transfer, system survey, process manipulation, file timing, matching, and proxy capability. The file transfer and system surveys abilities are particularly interesting because the Lazarus Group hackers stole large amounts of data from Sony, and this may have been the piece of malware that allowed them to overstring the data. It also means that they could examine the computer system looking for other ways to gain more access or control or do other damage. The backdoor allows the hackers to open ports in the victim's firewalls and use universal plug and play mechanism to discover routers and gateway services and add ports and add port mappings. Essentially, it makes it easier for the hackers to find other devices like computers and devices that are on the network and connect to communicate with them. A proxy tool. The malware also contained a proxy tool. It was likely installed as a service file, which might have been a .exe file demonstrating one of the key characteristics of malware files. Its executable nature. The proxy tool was configured to listen on TCP 4443. TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol, and is a protocol or list of rules that govern how data is sent between 2 points of connection, either over the internet or via another network. It works by taking a file that needs to be delivered, divided into packets of data, and then sending each packet to the IP layer of program, which then delivers. Hold on, let me just look at this video. The hack not only stole massive quantities of documents and emails, but also erased all the data on half the company's computers and servers. Looks like these guys really wanted to leave a message.
What if they could get real-time feedback?
Skip, of course. Not gonna play. Let me check out the score on the basketball game real quick, guys. Because right now the Pacers are playing the Thunder, and it looks like the Thunder are up by 10 points. It looks like the Thunder ain't gonna mess around. If I had to guess, I think they're gonna win, but I don't doubt. I'm not counting out the Pacers either. It seems like they're a very good basketball team. So check out the main. I'm on ESPN.com right now, so looks like Aaron Rodgers is gonna sign with the Steelers. That's interesting. I wonder why they do that. I don't know. I mean, I guess he's earned it, but they say the dude acts like a diva. I mean, he is a veteran. He made him wait like a motherfucker. BYU signs Young to extension after first year. Alright, anyway, let's go back to our little thingamabother we were reading. Port 443 is a standard port of line of communication used by websites that use SSL, which stands for Secure Socket Layer, if I'm not mistaken. So, this is the encrypted version of HTTP. So, HTTPS, which means secure, hypertext protocol, secure, runs on 443 using the SSL method. So it encrypts shit, right? Secure sockets layer, again, it's technology that establishes a secure encrypted link between a web server and the browser. Using an SSL certificate, when a web server activates SSL, it creates a public and private cryptographic key. The public key goes into a certificate signing request and is submitted to the certificate authority. Once they issue an SSL certificate, the web server matches the certificate to the web server's public key, and the web server can establish an encrypted link between the server and a person's browser. When a person's browser wants to connect to a site, It will retrieve the site certificate and ensure that it has not expired. That it was issued by the Trustworthy Certification Authority, and it being used by the website, the certificate was issued too if these criteria are met. The browser will establish a secure connection and as indicated by a lock near the URL, and I'm pretty sure you've seen that before. There's a little lock next to the URL address on your browser. So SSL was formerly used as a method encryption for HTTPS, the protocol for communicating over the internet. TLS has since replaced it as the most updated version. This proxy tool then listens for traffic on port 443, which has reserved for data being transferred in what should be a secure way. Ooh. Okay, so now it's getting to the nasty stuff. Destructive hard drive tool. As you can see down here, it said the hack not only stole massive quantities of documents and email, which is already kind of like a FU, a big FU, right? But it also erased all the data on half the company's computers and servers. So that's almost like kicking somebody when they're already out, like just stomping on somebody when they're knocked out. So these guys weren't playing. Destructive hard drive tool. The hack on Sony destroyed about 3/4 of the company's computers and servers at its central location and erased large amounts of data. The malware that infected Sony's systems contained 3 components, each of which was capable of deleting data or rendering computers inoperable through the changes to physical hard drives or the master boot record. Ooh, dang. I'm going to read that one more time. The hack on Sony destroyed about 3/4 of the company's computers, oucher, and servers, oucher, at its central location and erased large amounts of data, oucher. The malware that affected Sony's systems contained 3 components, each which was capable of deleting data or rendering computers inoperable through changes to the physical hard drives or the master boot record, oucher. So in other words, when you mess with the master boot record, this program needs the proper files to work and upload. So if you mess with this bad boy, it is over pretty much. You got bricked machines. You got computers that all they'll do is they'll start and they'll either hit you with, "Oh, sorry, system files not found." It'll hit you with like some dead screen, and that's it. You got some fancy $100, I don't know, maybe they're thousands of dollars, but you know you got computers that don't work, useless. A destructive hard drive tool is the first of these components. The tool was designed to wipe out the hard drive and destroy data and pass recovery, as well as make it more difficult to recover the affected machine. Dang. A hard drive is a piece of equipment that stores data long term. We all know that. And the MBR is a special boot sector of a hard drive. A boot sector is a physical sector of a hard drive that contains information about how to initiate the boot process and load the operating system. Without the MBR, the computer isn't able to load the operating system. We've all seen what the MBR is again. One more time, right? When you turn on the computer, it's some sort of bootloader screen will pop up. It'll say loading. So that bootloader program will start checking all the components that it needs to properly run the operating system that's installed. Whether that's Windows, whether that's Linux, or Apple, whatever, or iOS, whatever the fuck you call it, Mac OS, whatever. The destructiveness of the tool depended on the level of privileges or access to the systems the host computer had. If the host computer had administrator privileges, the tool could overwrite portions of as many as 4 physical hard drives and would overwrite the master boot record with a program designed to cause further damage if the hard drive were rebooted. If an individual had only user level access, then the malware would delete specific files and they would be practically irrecoverable. But the computer would still be usable. Thus, by overwriting the MBR or deleting files, the malware was capable of both destroying data and rendering computers physically unusable. The difference in the level of destruction depending on the victim's computer access or privileges demonstrates why the hackers would have been interested in getting the login credentials of employees within the high levels of access as mentioned in the beginning of the report. That is super interesting. Destructive target cleaning tool. This tool was also designed to make computers inoperable by overwriting its MBR. The malware was installed via an executable file which contained 3 parts: an executable, a DLL, and an encoded command file. The executable and DLL contained the code that overwrote the MBR, and the encoded the encoded command file contained the actual destruction commands that initiated the destructive code. Ooh. That's not good. Network propagation wiper. Alright guys, you know what? This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna continue this tomorrow just because I got something to do. But I'm not gonna lie, this was fun. So I'm definitely gonna continue off where I left off here. And then go over everything again. As you can see, I feel like we learned something today. I'm not gonna lie. We're getting an idea how these bad boys, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it sucks for Sony, but it seems like these dudes definitely knew what they were doing, and they had some sort of experience in, the art of hacking. It definitely sounds like everything that they were doing was designed for like maximum damage. Like, to me, it seems like these guys have probably done this before in other targets. Like, I don't think this is their first rodeo, because everything that they were doing is I guess you could say it's sophisticated to some degree. Like, it's something that a person who has a hacker mindset would do, and you know what I mean. Like, this is a very sophisticated attack, in my opinion. Is like it seems like everything that they're trying to do had a purpose and goal. Like, it was very goal driven. Like, they were trying to do a lot of stuff to try to, you know what I mean. Like, they had their hacking skills were used to make a point, and they made it. So I'll definitely do a second part, and we'll read the rest of it. And alright guys, hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you hit the like, sub, share, etc. I plan on doing more of these hacking breaches, and the reason I'm going to go deeper into this because I want to understand more about how hackers work and how they attack companies, because you get a pretty good solid idea, right? And then from there, if you want to be a red teamer or a blue teamer, whatever, etc., you get an idea of how these attacks occur and how you can help prevent them and or help cause them, if you're a red teamer. And by that I mean, if a company allows you to test their networks. I don't mean this to try this, out of like spite or be malicious in any kind of way. But reading these articles definitely does help you learn a lot about how they think and how they work and the sophistication on their skill set. And these guys, to me, they definitely showed some, to some degree, some sophistication, Alright guys, well,